not specific to the core JavaScript library or just the Infographic R specific helper functions, but this Infographic documentation, and that's what we'll also be using. And so you can see by the table of contents these different examples for either starting with a static image, which we'll do in this lesson, or doing more responsive figures that you'll see in a second. Okay, so now with that, we're primed for the lesson. I think I want to just show you a little bit more of the example that we're heading towards, and what we're going to do. We go back to the Infographic.js. You can see this simple example. And with this simple example, here we've got just some basic shapes. And this could be any SVG icon. I'll show you how to find an icon. And then we can click on this, and this is just a static image, and we'll replace the static image. And then this is using high charts. This is using Google Charts. And then this is a basic line chart. This is with that Plotly.js extra that adds some functionality with the IEA look. This goes to a whole new page, like maybe that's the specific ecosystem, or just you want to go out to a different page. And then this is another Google Charts example. Okay, so with that, let's go to the lesson. And the first step is to get your download started for Inkscape. So Inkscape is basically like a free Adobe Illustrator, and it's this program that allows you to edit vector-based graphics. So, and it stores all of its illustrations in SVG natively. So it makes it a great candidate to edit SVG. And SVG can be rendered by any web browser, and it's a vector-based thing. So you have a lot of functionality that you can give to it with JavaScript. But you don't need to know JavaScript and all that. All you need to know is a few basic editing ways of doing this stuff, and you can use the R Markdown in R to get started and to do the basics. So that's what we're going to do. So you want to go to either click on this release link with Inkscape or go to the download and the current version. And this is like over 100 megs, so it might take a little while for you to download and install, but go ahead and get that started. And eventually the link will catch up, and now it's going to download. But I already downloaded it and installed it. Okay, and then what you want to do is with our Studio open, and we're going to close this R Studio shortly because we have to reset our Studio. But what you want to do is install. You can copy this. And remotes is a package that should come install with R, and this install GitHub is a way of installing any R package on GitHub. So again, GitHub is designated based on owner, and then let me get the lights on. Owner, and then repository. Okay. And so we're gonna just run that. And I just installed it just to show you what it looks like. I can add that argument, force equals true. And you'll see that it goes and it downloads it and installs it. And then we'll want to close our Studio. So this is in the lesson, kind of talks about that. And then what we'll want to do is now we definitely want to open up our R3 exercises. So I'm on step now 5.2 of the lesson, and I'm going to open up R3 exercises. And just going to delete these previous attempts so we don't get confused. And okay, so now we're gonna, now we've got, where am I? I'm get working directory. So I'm the working directory of RStudio because I opened it. I used a little helper thing called Alfred for Mac, but I opened basically by double clicking r3exercise.rproj. That sets the working directory. And then what we can do is go File, New Project, and say New Directory, and then say scroll down. And because we've installed this Infographic R, we have this Infographic project template. So now I click on that, and now I'm going to say, I'm going to use this name, Infographic Project, inside my R3 exercises. So this is actually going to create an rproj file inside that existing one. And that's okay. I'm also going to tick this box to open in a new session, create that project. So it created the folder, and it populated that folder with some of these default files. And right off the bat, you'll notice a few things here. So this index.rmd, so any index.html is going to be the default web page that a web server serves up when visiting a folder, i.e. This website. And we're using two little tricks that we talked about last week. One is a parameterized R Markdown here. So it's got params and a CSV and an SVG. So this is that little table that we're going to link. And then this is the illustration that we have as a little starter example. And then, so that's the parameterized R Markdown report. And then this was, we discussed towards the end, which is a child. And if we knit this, we actually see this. It's a slightly different Inkscape example from what I showed before, but you can roll over and then I can click and look and get this little chart. Cool. Okay, so now we're going to explore how this works a little bit in more depth. So let's look at this little SVG child. And what it is it's the HTML that says, okay, here are these div tags to say start a row. I could think about it like this. And here, put the SVG in here. And this is Bootstrap for saying, of the 12 columns that I have of space available, use 9 of them for this illustration, and then use 3 of them for this little table of contents. And then load up all of that JavaScript and run this little link SVG JavaScript function from our custom JavaScript, and then run this. Now here, this is where we get these parameters. So these little guys right here, params, gets substituted here. So this way, I can use this same little child, and I'm just gonna, I can use the same RMD, and then across different pages, and it will use these parameters to render entirely different illustrations if I choose different parameters. So you don't have to know any HTML or JavaScript, you can just copy and paste this RMD and create new pages. And we can do the most minor little tweaks to this guy, which we'll do next to get this to work. So before we go even a little bit further, I want to point out that there's this other thing where here we've got this, even though it works here in the viewer pane, we open this is show in a new window. This is kind of unsatisfying. And because we lose our little SVG. And it's just this unfortunate consequence of how things work on the web more recently to be safe, meaning they're trying not, if people give a fully qualified URL, then that's, and bringing in content, then that's considered safe. And if it's a local file that it's arbitrarily loading, that's considered unsafe. And so we have to actually start a web server locally so that it can be a fully qualified URL. And I talk about that in here. So that you can go into the gory detail here. There's this thing called CORS, or cross-site scripting, and basically it's not allowed. So we want to be able to look at like what the full web browser look is like. And it's also really helpful to do stuff in Google Chrome and use the JavaScript console. And so we're actually gonna, if we run this little function shelf, it'll install it. That's our librarian shelf. Then because I already had this package server installed, it just loaded the library. And then what we can do is run this httd. And what this does is it launches it. So now, notice before, I think I closed it. But before it had this file. Here I can stop and show you let's stop this daemon or the little message. And I knit this and go up. See, this is actually the fully qualified URL is to a file. It's not to HTTPS. So we want it, or HTTP. So in order to use the D3 library to load this SVG, we have to actually run a little local web server. So let's do that. Now we're going to run this again. Or we have this package installed. This is the little one-liner to run the web server. And now when I open a new window, notice it's not file. It's actually, it's a local web server serving these files. And now I can actually see this graphic. And so let's go ahead and take this little toy example and do a couple tweaks to it. And so we're just going to do the most basic thing, which is we're going to link a thermometer icon to a temperature indicator. So we're going to swap out this red circle and so make some visual room in that infographic. And then we're going to add a thermometer icon. And then we're going to have a little modal content of that temperature indicator. And then link the icon to that modal content using this little infographic. So let's start by creating this modals sst.html. And we'll just go in we're still in our new infographic project that is actually inside our R3 exercises. And I'm just going to say, and notice that there's actually a whole nother folder called modals, and that's where that content is currently. So if we look at yeah, so we want to start looking at these files. And I'm going to go into the More, Show Folder in New Window. So that is, I mentioned this here in 5.3, More, Show Folder in New Window. And I'm on a Mac, so this opens up Finder. This is a really helpful way of being able to get to your file system wherever your project is, current working directory. And sorry, this is kind of small, but we see all these little elements that I was talking about. So we can see this, here's the SVG. I'm actually going to kind of skip ahead and then just so we can see where we go from SVG to the CSV table to the modal content. And we open this in Inkscape. Whoops, that was when I had a previous example. And we can see that, for instance, this, whoops, wrong one, not Illustrator, sorry, Inkscape example. That's important. So that you can use either Adobe Illustrator or the free Inkscape, and they actually have different starting points because they handle how the icons, the underlying SVG. And so if I look at Inkscape SVG as the Inkscape example SVG, you'll see that, okay, so this is it, whoops, and a lot of times I'll lose it. So I have to go view, zoom in to zoom drawing, and now I'm back. And we can look at the layers, and that's how a lot of this Illustrator stuff is handled, is with layers. And sorry, this is really small on your screen, but here's chart example 4 is the red guy. And so that's the identifier, chart example 4. Now, if I look at this icon link.csv and I open that, say in Excel or LibreOffice, oops, close this old one. So I can just right click, open with, and you should have similar functionality on a Windows machine where you can use this right click, open with, and choose the program. And if we look at this table and zoom to the selection so you can see all this. So this chart example 4 is the icon and how it's identified with that layer. This is the SVG that it's coming from. And then chart as image example, that's what we saw. See, this is the file one. And if I go back to this viewer and open this, chart as image example. So that's the title. And then chart is in, it also shows up here as the title, this top level header. So, and then here it shows up as the title. So I just am trying to point out the correspondence between here, this is an SVG with, and then modal underscore image.html. So that is the content that then opens up. So we can look at file modals, modal image, open and header. and this is the HTML. So we don't want to require you to edit HTML, and that's why our Markdown is so nice, is that you don't have to do that. So let's just create a really simple HTML using our Markdown inside this modals folder, and then link up. We'll link that up. So we'll just go File, New, R Markdown, and I'm on step 5.3.1, and I'm just going to OK this. Doesn't matter, I'm going to overwrite this content. The important thing is that when I go to save this, that I go into the modals folder and call it SST. And now I'm going to go here and just overwrite this really simple content. And all this is this is so I can say, if I say page title, it doesn't actually create a header by default, but if you bookmark the page, that's what page title does. And it's telling us to output an HTML document. And this shebang, this is an image, and then this is the caption within the image. So if I go to use the designer mode, it's a lot more sensible, and you see the actual image. So this is a long-term SST, the State of the Ecosystem Report from the Northeast Fisheries, where Kim Bastille works, and probably made this figure. And so this is super simple RMD, and then we can knit that, and we get this. So this is some content that we then want to make pop up. Okay, so let's do that. Now we have the content, and so let's say I just go in here. This was, and now I just change this. Instead of chart example 4, maybe it's sst.html. All right, so I save this, and now I can go over here. I can, and let's change, instead of charts as image example, we can say sea surface temperature. So all I've edited so far are these two cells, and now I can refresh this, and the little JavaScript will reload that table, and you'll notice now it says sea surface temperature is the associated title. And now when I click on that, I get this modal. Cool, okay. So that's how to update the modal content with that linkage. But now let's say we want to update the actual illustration. Well, we can use that Inkscape that we had previously downloaded. And I'm going to use that same little trick. And I'm going to right click on this SVG. I think I already did that. Yep, it's here. And actually, before I even do that, I want to show you something else about this SVG. So I can open this with some little text editor, like Atom. And you can see this is the content of it. So SVG is both human and machine readable. It's not super human readable, but it's just XML. So it looks like HTML, but it's the more generically XML. And it describes a path, and it has these little vertices for that path. And each of these paths then draws what we saw visually. So we can use Inkscape to now edit this. So I can go ahead and I can just delete chart example 4. Let's just remove that. I can save that. And so the entry is still in that table, but now I've deleted it from the image, from the SVG. All right, so now let's go get it. Let's go get something that resembles something we might associate with temperature. So we'll just, if I Google thermometer icon, So I see there's some images. I can click on images, and I can even specify file type SVG, and it does this little tricky thing where now it's saying SVG files. So, and then I liked this one. So I've done this, I can visit this page, and I can see that I can download the SVG. So I'm going to go ahead and download that. Now here's my little project. And maybe you create like a little icons folder to keep track, but the point is we can download this, and I'm just going to get it into that icons folder. Okay, and now I can just basically just drag and drop this thermometer SVG over into my scene. Okay, so again, things got a little whack with it being a monstrous thermometer, like in Baker, Nevada, if you've ever seen that thing. It's really tall, usually really hot, and or Arizona maybe. But anyway, now we can zoom to the drawing. Now I can resize this thing using these little handles. Okay, and we have a little thermometer. And the main thing is that what we want to do is get that thermometer into a new layer. And notice that there's a difference between the text, the icons, and the text. And this is in that awesome documentation that Jai just did a massive overhaul of for Infographics. And I'll show you that in a second. But we can create a new layer. So we just do the little plus, and we could just call this thermometer and add that. So that's not in the right place. We want to get it inside the icon, so we can just click, oops, unlock that, click it, move it into under icons, and now we've got our thermometer. And then I want to associate this guy and then move it to that layer. So I want to move it into thermometer. So we can move it, and cool, now we have our thermometer. So the only thing we have to do is just update that little table to say, okay, this is the thermometer icon, and it's going to go to the SST. All right, so now we refresh, and there's our thermometer icon. Okay, there's one other little trick if that doesn't work, and that's also in the documentation. It might depend on how that is structured. You can go into Edit, XML Editor, and here assign the ID thermometer. Okay, and I can see that it needs an ID, so that this label of thermometer wasn't going to cut it. It needs an ID, either the group or the higher level group or the individual icon. So either way, that'll now work. And now I refresh, and now it's sea surface temperature, and now I can click, and we have that little image. So you can imagine, and so now I can, let's see, for this R3 exercises, maybe, so now maybe I change my site YAML if I want to add another little entry. I'm going to add a menu to Infographics, and just create a really simple R Markdown and then just link to this little folder, check out, and then this is going to be this you have to refresh this. So this infographic. So now I'm going to create a little link to infographic graphique project, and this goes to this folder. Or this would have been a little easier. So then this would be called Infographics for my menu. And then this is here. So now just knit that. Oops. There we go. Knit that. And then we have our little link to our little infographic. And then maybe I'll just knit the home page so it has that infographics link, and we'll just go ahead and commit. I'll select everything and then stage it, and now plus infographics website example. Now when I push that up, oops, pull. Ooh, merge content conflict. Ooh, okay. All right. Well, this would just go up to that website and would be on my personal website. I could handle the conflict, but that's not this exercise. Yeah, but this is the basic idea. So you can, we could alternatively change this SST to something else that's more interactive. And it could be any of the visualizations we had before. Like if I rename this to SST static, and file save as SST dynamic. And then we could just grab like maybe the example, I think of the, whoops. I did a strange thing here. Yeah. Hmm. Well, I think you get the idea that I could basically create a little, maybe I'll just use the little digraphs example from the HTML widgets. Showcase. So these are all these HTML widgets, digraphs, and here's a little time series as a quick example. So I can delete that, insert a little R chunk. Oops. And yeah, it generates that. So then when I knit this, and I don't know, maybe I want to turn off the echo. Echo is false. So we don't see that. And now we've got this interactive plot. So then you can see that now the little modal window has an interactive plot. Okay, well, that is the hour. And I just wanted to point out this really basic application of the infographics. And also for finding out more, there's this infographic guide. This is this online manual where it goes into a lot more detail. Here's how to create an infographic image, like an Inkscape, and the layer organization, and possibly needing to edit the layer as XML, and how to get to that menu and changing that ID. The link table and other dependencies, and even different modal window types, and how to deal with that. And there's a lot more products that we're envisioning for this sort of application. And so you can also look at this manuscript. Pike Spector is the lead author on this manuscript, and we just submit it for Sanctuary's Conservation Report Series. So it's in review, and we talk about this and how eventually we could also do scrollytelling with it, which is the notion that you could sequence these things in to describe how like the heat wave might relate to the algal blooms, might relate to forage fish redistributing and whales entangling. So that was a big story on the US West Coast, and that you could imagine with the scrollytelling, as you scroll, different elements on the left-hand side highlight within your viewable pane, and the data indicator updates on the right-hand side with some caption. So a lot of scrollytelling you see on like New York Times and Washington Post and the like. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna nip it at the hour and open up. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat while I was talking, but let's take a look at this chat. And oh my gosh, my microphone is off. Holy smokes.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. Oh, I just thought I got through that full hour with my mic off.
No, we would have stopped you before that. Yeah,
Okay, good.
I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, but please feel free to raise your hands or type your questions into the chat so that can answer those for you.
I'm gonna see if I can turn on the lights here meanwhile. Feel free to call out any questions or comments. And also, I think Jai and Pike and maybe Tyler are on the call. So if you guys have anything else to add as co-authors of this stuff, then please feel free to jump in. Hmm.
Wild, but we'll give it another minute or two as people ponder some stuff. But if we don't have any questions, we can cut off at an hour. Or Ben, if you have anything else you'd like to touch on.
Well, I think, okay, I see a question coming in now. Oh, okay. Do you have any tips to create infographics when not working with a graphic designer to make nice detailed SVGs? Okay, so that's a really good question. So I showed this little trick of just Googling for icons. There are a few other resources that are quite nice. So I'll add it into the chat. But there's this integration application network. So this is out of the University of Maryland, and looks like they've changed the site since I was last here, but they have a media library and they have symbols. And this is actually, they have really beautiful symbols. I encourage you to, really to give them credit. I think you have to log in to get this, and then you want to give them attribution. With the Florida Keys IEA example, show you how we, whoops, wrong one. We made a little link at the bottom to give infographic credit. In this case, it was Amanda Dillon who did all the artwork for that. But you can use this IAN media library, and there's really nice stuff there. The other one that's pretty cool is PhiloPic. So this has a whole ton of critters, and I kind of like the really simple black silhouette to keep the visual less complicated, and PhiloPic is really good for that. And there's actually, I think, an R PhiloPic that, yeah, that our OpenSci guys, Scott Chamberlain, made. And this is, you can even integrate these PhiloPics into your ggplots and add silhouettes and, have fun with cats, because that's what we do on the web. So there's that guy too. And yeah, those are the PhiloPic and this library. The other thing is, if you wanted to make these into silhouettes, you can, into just more of a binary black and white. And there's some guidance also. If you find a raster image, there is some guidance in here about like just any pixelated image, turning that into a more of a vector-based thing. So dealing with raster-based elements. And I'm more familiar with the way to do it in Inkscape, in Illustrator, which is using this make and expand. And I guess there's also a way to do it in Inkscape. So yeah, I think those are the basic resources. Oh, the Noun project. Thank you for mentioning that. That's a good one. Yeah, really good one. Okay, so let's look how are we doing on thermometers? Oh, wow. See, these are great. And then you can download these and also color code them and change them. It's all vector based. So really nice. Let's see. So this is Creative Commons. Awesome. So you can use the icon and yeah, freely. Let's say, how are we doing on whales? Ooh, lots of whales. Very nice. Okay. Thank you. Great addition there. Yeah, another one is I like these font awesome icons, and then flat icon is like a mega search. So you can pay for a bunch of these font awesomes, and if you pay, then you can download the SVG. So yeah, there's a ton of icon-based libraries out there. It's how a lot of the web looks these days. And then flat icon. Yeah. And that IAN site also has some nice background. So you can look up, let's say, estuary, and you can get these like nice 3D or coastline 2D barrier, and that could be your background. And the background image, because we don't need to make it clickable, it could also be just an image, and that might, you can store raster images inside of an SVG, which is a little confusing, but yeah, you can. And you actually get prompted for that option the first time you drag over an image into the Illustrator, but I had turned that off. Yeah, when you use Inkscape, I should say. So maybe what we'll do is give it, oh, maybe I'll just mention that, let's see, the bottom is infographic guide. There's the infographic. This is an attempt for us to try to describe some differences between where things live. And we have these builder sort of libraries, whether it's JavaScript based or R based, here and here. And things live either in Mbon, where it's more like core building, or if it's specific to the sanctuaries program or the IEA program, then it'll live in these GitHub organizations. So these are the individual repos, and then these are the organizations within. So here you see that that's Mbon, and this is NOAA IEA is the owner, this is Mbon as the owner, and then this is ONMS as the owner. So it's a little confusing because and then we have instances, so places where we've actually used those libraries to then generate these infographics for various things. And I'll just show this other one that Jai made. Which is responsive tables. Okay, so here's the demonstration of the Northeast indicators. And then here's the one that we just did, but now it's in table form. So it's the similar concept to what we did before, but in table form. So it's not SVG. And this actually might be a good place to start with organizing your indicators, because so much of this is really trying to match the art that you have as the illustration or the conceptual model with available data. And then there's some back and forth generally as you develop these. So this is actually a good starting point, is just to organize it like this. And that this talks about how to build that out. It's part of the infographic JS. Which you can see here in this part 2, responsive tables. Okay, so this other question, can I embed this content within another web page, a story map or a general project web page? Okay, so that if you have edit capability, you should be able to create a page with this content in it. And the nice thing about that is that it doesn't have to be in what's called the HTML head. This can all be in the body of the HTML document. So as long as you can insert HTML into a website, you should be able to create infographics there. The reality is if you use a content management system, it can do some squirrely things, and this can be trickier than it looks. For instance, Jai's been working a lot on the Drupal content management system that the IEA uses, and vanilla Drupal got it to work, but their instance of the Drupal, it did not. It's because it's already loading jQuery, which is this other library that Bootstrap needs to open up the modal, and there's a bunch of little conflicts. So in theory, yes. In practice, you might hit some weird little bugaboos. Can you link one modal to the state of another modal? Okay. For example, the user changes the state of A and examine how the indicator B is expected to change. That is essentially a no, unless you're a JavaScript wizard. That's unusually difficult. I showed that with the Flex dashboard because it's actually baked all as one HTML page, and the JavaScript can easily synchronize within itself so that the time slider, so I showed that last time when creating a Flex dashboard with the reporting module, and that's because all of those time indicators are in the same web page. If you have different modals, the way that infographic works is it's actually pulling from different web pages, so it doesn't really sync. And there, if you wanted to have that functionality, then it's basically you're going into the shiny land where you can create reactivity between different windows, and that there's a lot of options there. So yeah, hopefully that answers it. Maybe it's a good segue into doing shiny, not this coming week, but the week after. So this coming week, we will go into, oh yeah, no, we are doing Shiny. And then we're ending with the packages. Okay, yeah, so next week we'll go into Shiny, and that's where we actually create an interactive application, and you could do that kind of thing. So can you integrate into a Shiny app? So yes, definitely. Ideally, there's an ideal way of doing it, and we're not quite at the ideal way. So if we look at this infographic project, the way we implemented this is we use this little trick of this parameters, and then we use this little trick of this child, so that we don't have to mess with all the HTML stuff. Really, ideally, this would be its own HTML widget. And that's like all these guys that we've been looking at, like leaflet and digraphs. And so there is a way to develop a widget to build out all these dependencies into Infographic R, but we haven't gone there yet. And that way it would be similar to the others in creating that functionality, where we'd feed, let's say, the CSV into the function and have as a second argument the SVG, and it would render. I do want to mention that there is this pretty cool R2D3, which is a fun play on words, that kind of gets there. So with R2D3, so this is D3s, the library I mentioned that allows you to basically create and manipulate SVG objects, which could be any kind of SVG-based figure. And then R, obviously, is R. And then this is this little package that allows you to make that bridge. So you can actually get your SVG object and create rectangles and enter and append them and create like these little functions. But this is a little different than what we're doing with the Infographics. So this doesn't port exactly, but if you want to do other D3 things, I just want to point out that this is available. And because it's an HTML widget, it can work with Shiny pretty nicely. So, yeah. So hopefully it's a long-winded response, but
I'm not seeing any more questions pop up. But does anyone have any last minute question? Not seeing anything, but thank you so much, Ben. This was super interesting and really cool work that you're doing. So thanks for sharing that with us.
right on. Well, thank you all for keeping on with this, and I look forward to chatting about Shiny next week. So yeah, and yeah, and cleaning up some of this stuff. So yep. Thanks so much, y'all. Talk to you later.